H. Brown at Mannys. It's Wednesday, May the 31st. There's a show. It's it's a discussion of the Banko Brown killing, and I won't say any more. Here we go.
Right after.
Say hi.
Hello, folks. How you doing?
Riding large talks, and you're just like.
This is the concerned group. Anybody own that?
I don't think so.
It's free.
I can beat this. A small gathering. Be very interested to see what Eskenazi has to say. We'll keep it to that. What do you think of my cane?
I come right behind you, son.
I've been waiting to get lame so I could use that sucker. This lady I'm going to center on now has buried every comment I've made on any columns she's made for the last 6 months. Lady with the glasses. The sad thing is they're the last honest outlet in town, and they've gone under. You know, I mean, I don't think I'm particularly that radical of a commenter, and yet, I mean, I made a comment. Somebody complained and said that things were appearing differently, and I made a comment. They had the outlet, Mission Local, had mentioned that they had a new editor and they were rearranging staff, and I said they had an editorial shakeup, and maybe that was the problem. And from then on, everything I've ever posted on Mission Local has been spiked. Notice the interested crowd here is all white. Well, not all, but damn near, and all older. Banko was 24 or something. I don't know. The guard that shot him, I don't know how old he was, but not very old. They're both my kids. They're two kids who could have been in my class or linked to my class easily. The dog's position would be I'd give the family the $25 million, the family and the lawyers. The lawyers would get most of it, of course. And then I'd turn around and if I were on the jury, there's no way I could convict the shooter. So I'm on both sides because both of these guys could have been my students. And I would give Banko Brown's family and lawyers the money. And the other guy, I agree with the DA on not charging him. And if he were charged and I were on the jury, I could not vote him guilty. Society's guilty. Or as Gonzalez said, Your Honor, I plead on behalf of my client, I plead not guilty due to societal failure.
Welcome to Mannys. My name is Precious Green. I am the Director of Community and Partnerships here at Mannys, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to today's important conversation. Who is here for the first time? We always like to ask. Okay, well, welcome. You have come to an incredibly special corner right here, literally on the corner of 16th and Valencia. So to tell you just a little bit about what we do, and of course you can follow up with people who've been here before for even more detail, we are a physical space for the community to get engaged, for the civics lessons that we took in high school, most of us had bad civics lessons, to actually bring that to life. And we do that with conversations like this about the topics that matter, with decision makers, thought leaders, academics, the mayor, senators, you name it, they've more than likely been on our stage. And so it's really important that we are able to provide this space, because that's the only way our communities and our democracy can really survive and thrive, is if we all are informed and are all part of the conversation. And so with that in mind, we're really honored to have this new partnership with Mission Local. I don't know about you all, but they really, in my time here in the Bay, have proven to be the go-to source for what's happening behind the story, as well as the story itself. Yes, round of applause. And so it's really awesome to be able to say, like, hey, Joe Eskenazi knows my name. Woo-hoo. So, but this is a monthly series here at Mannys, so go ahead and mark your calendars. Today it's going to be on the fourth Tuesday of each month, but you won't want to miss it, because we have Joe Eskenazi booked on the calendar, on the stage, doing it as only he can, and you are about to experience that with tonight's challenging and important conversation. So without further ado, please, Joe, come on stage and you can introduce our guest for the evening.
Thank you so much, and thanks to Precious, and thanks to Mannys for having us here today. Very important discussion that I've been dying to have, and we're lucky to have two very thoughtful and astute panelists to have it with, and that would be Honey Mahogany and Jeffrey Morris. Please come on up. Please come on up. I want to maximize my time talking about the substance here. So I think most of you are probably familiar with the backstory of the shooting death of Banko Brown on April 27th. Banko Brown, a black trans person who struggled with housing security, was waylaid and wrestled to the ground and ultimately shot by a security guard at the Walgreens on 825 Market Street. And when last I addressed many of you last month, we were talking about the Bob Lee case. And before the arrest was made, that case was kind of the stand-in for the state of San Francisco, and wither San Francisco with this case. And of course, that turned out to not be an accurate label at all. It turned out to be a downright Floridian case with high rises and drugs and clandestine sex, and that was even before the defendant fired his lawyers and brought in people from Miami that advertised themselves as legal hitmen and have worked for Donald Trump and Drake. So we're going to leave that case as it sails off into the Floridian netherworld. The case I think really sums up the state of San Francisco is Banko Brown and the depressing and dystopian situation in which a black trans homeless person allegedly stealing snacks, who had food security issues, is shot dead by a security guard who has had issues of his own, and is they're fighting over $15 worth of capital for a bad faith corporation. Just really depressing, and really sums up much of the impersonality and stark wealth disparities in San Francisco today. And that's why I want to talk about not just, I don't want to lose Banko Brown in all this, but I want to talk about what we can learn about San Francisco and is this us? But I want to start with this, which is, a lot of people are asking for justice for Banko Brown. And I want to know what would justice for Banko Brown be? And both of you, please, equally valid, please.
Well, I think for me, justice for Banko Brown means never again.
Honey mahogany.
Right? Because we can't go back and bring back this person's life. We can never pay enough money or restitution to the parents or the family members or the community to make this right. But I think what justice for Banko Brown would be is, number one, the pursuit of justice, right? That his life mattered, and that the city of San Francisco, the district attorney's office, that we took his life seriously, just as seriously as any other life here in San Francisco. But number two, that we endeavor for it to never happen again. And when I say that, I mean specifically that we ensure that no one is shot and killed without repercussion when they have no weapons in their hands, when they have perhaps allegedly stolen $15 worth of food, when they are walking out of a store. We need to prevent that from happening and stop that from happening. And of course, we have to do more and do better in addressing our homelessness crisis on our streets. We have to do more to provide culturally competent services that are safe for not just unhoused folks, but also trans folks who are also unhoused. That's what justice would look like to me.
So justice for me, for Banko Brown, is probably maybe 5 different elements. So I feel like it's somewhat of justice as came with the release of the video. Banko's no longer known as a possible knife-toting suspect against this helpless security guard, right? So now the true narrative is out, and we've all seen the video. So that in itself is a component of justice for Banko Brown. But then it's also a component of tomorrow the mayor will be given her budget, right? Is it services devoted to trans masculine males? And that is what we've been hearing in the community, especially for those that are Black, darker melanated skin. Another justice for Banko Brown is that Banko, I know, was in times in the 300 system as foster care and the 600 system of delinquency. So AB 12, extending AB 12 to 25 and not 21. Remember, Banko Brown slept on the bar a week prior to even passing away. So, and then more housing for trans community and transitional youth. And lastly, justice for Banko Brown is reform about should we have armed guards in family stores like our supermarkets, like Walgreens and stuff, to where your basic needs are in there.
You reading my notes? Separate and apart from what the DA can do, and that's the matter of Banko Brown being shot by Michael Irwin Anthony, the security guard, it's almost on the nose that right as District Attorney Brooke Jenkins declined to press charges, the city attorney announced a $230 million settlement with Walgreens because of their acknowledgement of fueling the opioid epidemic just in this city. $230 million just for this city. So, what accountability do we need for the larger forces that stood behind Michael Irwin Anthony?
I would say what accountability, again, is we are fighting for our moral compass here in San Francisco. And I get it. I get it. Like, I want deodorant and I don't want the shelves wiped out. But we have to say what is more important in this city, human life or property. And corporations know how to secure their goods in a way that does not give death over snacks. So I think we need to push harder for corporations to do to be better stewards to people. I mean, we have people out here suffering, and Walgreens was part of the suffering. Over $2 million was granted for their opioid use. And so you can't put drugs in our streets, get people addicted on them, and get mad when they come steal from you or do things. So I think we need to push corporations to be better stewards to their patrons. They have all kinds of mechanisms. You lock the whole store up and we just point out what we want, but it shouldn't be an armed guard there. And I think that we need to quit thinking you need a model victim. It's not always model victims, you know? And one of the things with DA Jenkins is that I felt like Banko wasn't a model victim. And so you could just discard him. But we fought back like that. No, Banko Brown lives matter. So you know, I'm big about more of an objective standard for DA in charging and less subjective.
Honey, I'm sure you have something to add.
Sure, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, I'd like to know what accountability do we need for the larger forces, Walgreens, the security guard company, among other things, behind Michael Irwin Anthony?
Yes, I mean, I think that there is a lot of culpability on the part of Walgreens. I mean, even in creating this narrative around San Francisco. And, you know, I'm not going to argue that San Francisco is perfect, that it doesn't have its problems, that we don't have to deal with, you know, homelessness, the fentanyl crisis, a retail theft. And, you know, as a small business owner myself, I have experienced some of that, you know, craziness that is on our streets, entering into our space and having to deal with that and manage that. But I think at the end of the day, we as a collective have to have this base value that human life is worth more than things, right? I think that Walgreens, you know, perpetuated a narrative that they were losing all of this money, that, you know, the state of San Francisco streets was having an insane impact on its profits. And, you know, lo and behold, they've had, you know, one of their highest grossing years ever, you know? And then they actually were forced to publicly walk back their statements and their complaining over the last few years. And it's interesting because when I worked in the supervisor's office, I mean, I had a lot of conversations with various CEOs from different companies, and many of them complaining from everything from, and, you know, with reason, right? They were worried with things like bringing people back into work, you know, ending remote work, but also the state of our streets and what we were doing to take care of that. Yes, the city has a responsibility to keep our streets safe, to house people, to feed people, but Walgreens also has that responsibility for the people that enter its store. And I don't think that we as a society and as a city can allow Walgreens to effectively have killed someone and get away with it. You know, we have to now look back at our books and look how we can regulate security guards. Why are they being armed? Is this a situation that they need to be armed? Are there other methods that could have been employed instead? I mean, now we are in a position, and I think we owe it, and this is a part of justice for Banko Brown, to really look at how we can prevent this from happening again.
And Jafria, when we were discussing this earlier, you mentioned that Walgreens is not the only store that has low to middling cost items that has armed guards. You mentioned the Foods Co. in Bayview, which is a place I go, and I was kind of blown away because that supermarket literally shares a building with the police department. So to have an armed guard there is pretty insane. And I was hoping you could talk to me about what are the rules governing armed guards, and you know how much leeway does an armed guard get, and what can we do about that as a city?
In the mirror.
That's loaded. Article 25 of the police code, when I first became aware of it, when Supervisor Catherine Stephanie went and looked at it and asked for a full report. This is something that was passed back in the 70s, but it hasn't been properly monitored by our police department, right? And it's supposed to monitor armed guards in the city and county of San Francisco. So right now I'm working on legislation with Supervisor Dean Preston is to remove the term property, because in the code it says you can remove your gun from your holster if you feel threat of person or property. So this is just a civil thing because, criminal law comes from the state. But property, you should never be pulling a gun for property. If someone has a gun, of course, you pull your gun. That's a threat of person. But to pull your gun for property is a problem. Now, I know Mr. Wayne Anthony states that he felt his life was in danger, but it didn't look. He drawn the gun as Banko was retreating outside of the door before the flinch or whatever that caused him to shoot. But before then, the gun was already drawn. So that's the question there was he should have been in violation if Supervisor Preston's amendment goes through, right? To get rid of that. But I think we need to look at is that we've worked really hard with like Black Lives Matter movement, the criminal justice reform, to make our police more accountable with implicit bias training, de-escalation training. These armed guards are not at the level of our police. So we need to make them more accountable too, not less accountable. Because that disincentivizes police. Why I want to be the police when I could just tote a gun as private security or open my company and just run like a vigilante, right? So that needs to change at the state level. We need to have it comparable because you should imagine, like I have members of my family trying to get a concealed carry weapon. Oh, it is so many hurdles. So, it doesn't feel equitable in what security guards, armed guards have to do now to carry a gun in our family stores.
And you both are former legislative aides, who represent areas, District 6 and District 11, where there were Walgreens and other stores where there are armed guards. And I'm wondering, was it ever communicated to you the rationale of why an armed guard is required in a situation like this? This is not a bank.
Well, I'm the legislative aide that kind of was doing all the commercial retail theft, right? I haven't seen. We did have a security guard get shot on Mission Street in the Excelsior. I haven't been back in there to see if they had an armed guard with Safeway, but I know in the Bayview I've seen armed guards, but I can't attest if we have armed guards in the Excelsior. But armed guards, if you are guarding the Rolex store, and because if people coming to rob jewelry stores, they're usually armed. That makes sense. And we as a society kind of see armed guards with jewelry stores, right? But eggs and butter, you know what I'm saying? So many people don't know I'm a big advocate of Southern neighborhoods. I'm born and raised in Baby Hunters Point. Now I live in Ocean View. And D11 is that all of this happens in our areas in the southern side, the more poor side, the more family centered, where all the children live in the city. It happens on our side. And many people are just unaware of some of the actions that they have in our areas. So I think this case opens it up to a broader scenario because these armed guards are not just only in San Francisco. There is probably some in East Oakland, in other poor areas, and we have to figure out a better way. And it has to be community-based.
Now let's go back to Michael Irwin Anthony. If you read his transcripts or watched the videos, which were all released earlier this month, hard to watch. Emotional, recounting a difficult life. Separate and apart from what he did in the moment, do you feel sympathy for this man, and what would be justice for him for what he did? What would, does he need to be incarcerated for long periods of time, or what does justice look like here?
For me, again, it's less about the perpetrator and more about the victim. We have a justice system where we value certain people's lives more than others. And that's, I think, is what is wrong, right? That's why the Black Lives Matter movement started. We have been screaming from our lungs in the streets that Black Lives Matter and that we want to be treated equally to everybody else in this society. And I think what happened with Banko Brown is that it was a very clear no, that life did not matter as much. It didn't matter as much as, for example, the ex-fire commissioner who was beaten, right? Who was then found out to have, bear maced these unhoused folks, and they retaliated by beating him. The DA in that case overruled her own employee who said, we're not gonna file because it is self-defense. She overruled him to say, no, we're still gonna press charges. And in this case, which this young man, Banko Brown, lost his life, and there is clear video evidence of what transpired, she refused to prosecute. In fact, came out before the case was even done being investigated and said, we're not gonna prosecute, this is self-defense. So for me, it's less about the suspect and who he is and how much Banko Brown's life matters to the city of San Francisco. Because if we believe in justice and a justice system, if we believe in the rule of law, then there's a process that needs to play out. I don't want anyone to face long periods of time in prison, right? That's not something that I feel like does good for anyone, but but if we have this system, then it needs to be applied equally across the board.
I would definitely agree. Equal application of the law. You can't pick a worthy victim. But what I would say is I'm a huge community leader in the Black community, and I wanna really think, because prior to us knowing Banko Brown was a trans male, they mentioned Banko Brown's dead name first, right? And then to hear the security guard say she. So it was harmful for me, because if you were saying she, not talking about Banko in the transition, but let's just take the she. That was a man beating on a woman in his mind. He knew he was beaten. And so Banko's transition is one thing, but the guard didn't know. And so in his mind, he was beating up a woman. So those are some ferocious hits. And a lot of people say, oh, well, they're Black. Oh, he's Black, Joffrey. And that's a lot of non-Black people saying that. Wrong is wrong. You don't get exonerated because you're Black harming a Black person. We have a problem with Black on Black crime now. And so for me, I know like different people believe in abolitionists in the eradication of jails and systems. I don't subscribe to that. He deserved, to me, to be prosecuted for the crime that he committed on Banko Brown. And that's how I feel. I don't have remorse for Mr. Anthony because he didn't have remorse for Banko.
Now, Banko Brown was, as you just mentioned, a Black trans man. And honey, I'm hoping you can begin to tell us how this tragedy is resonating in the trans community.
I mean, I think that there are many, many trans people. San Francisco, let me back up and say, San Francisco is known as an LGBTQ Mecca. It's a place where we're supposed to be able to be safe, where Harvey Milk was supervisor, where the Compton's cafeteria riots happened, where, it has given us so much amazing, rich queer culture, from the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence to the imperial court system. I mean, so many of these, the gay men's chorus, all of these things started right here in San Francisco. And yet, I would argue that, San Francisco is not a safe place for queer and trans people. And I say that because it is not a safe place for anyone seeking refuge right now. The rents are too high. People are struggling to find work or housing or resources that they're able to sustain themselves. And so many of our queer and trans people end up on the street. Now, I used to work as a homeless outreach worker for Larkin Street Youth Services. That was my first full-time job. And I saw so many queer and trans people who are unhoused living on the streets. And in fact, our numbers show us that 40% of our queer youth who are our youth who are homeless identify as queer. So Clearly we are failing queer and trans people. And even as we add things like, a trans basic income pilot and, a trans navigation center and, other services, and we have a Mayor's Office of Trans Initiatives, the Mayor's Office of Trans Initiatives is doing great work, so is the Trans District, so are the many trans serving organizations, and yet it is not enough. We have not yet made a dent in our unhoused population. And one of the reasons I believe that Banko Brown ended up in this situation is because he did not feel safe accessing services. He was a 26-year-old Black trans man who was looking for housing, and he didn't feel comfortable, in a women's shelter. He didn't feel comfortable in a men's shelter, and it was incredibly hard for him to find a place where he felt safe and cared for. So the city of San Francisco has been failing, I think, generally its unhoused population, but also its queer population as well.
I want to just add, because I did a similar panel, Honey and I, for the Harvey Milk Club, and in that panel we actually had trans masculine males there, African American, to highlight it is the San Francisco gay experience, and it's also Black gay and trans experience, right? And that is different regarding funding. So one of the things that Corey and Xavier were shouting is that it needs to be more services for trans male services. And the reason why Banko struggled, because it wasn't enough resources centered to that population as well. And is that Black trans males have the hardest time when you look at everybody from cis, then you start going to trans in the spectrum, that they are at the lowest totem pole. So I think, like, when, yes, again, justice for Banko is that hopefully the mayor is allocating at least $1 million or something for trans male services.
Let me take a big step back. Is that San Francisco, as you've helped us understand, is a city that's not hospitable to Black people. And Black people make up about 1 out of every 20 residents of this city. And yet in this situation, the security guard is Black, the victim is Black, the chief of police is Black, the DA is Black, the mayor is Black. What do we learn about
Black?
what do we learn about San Francisco from this statistical oddity?
Let me answer this. I'm gonna get controversial. The problem is that unfortunately we have some Black puppets, and it's easier and it's more digestible to run plays with Black faces than non-Black faces, and more mainstream agendas and powerhouses have understood that. That you can, it's more digestible, and you'd be like, oh, that's a racist policy. I can't be racist, I'm Black. So that's what I'm gonna say, is that it is clearly policies that have been done in the last 18 months to 2 years that have taken us back a whole decade, and they've been done by people with Black faces. And so, I mean, you and I...
Which policies do you have in mind?
You and I met during redistricting, right? About them trying to kill our voices over in the Bayview. I mean, in the Tenderloin, how they messed up. And the Tenderloin and the Bayview are the 2 largest Black populations in the city. And it's by design. We have the most toxins in the Bayview, and the Tenderloin, anyone that experienced homelessness, they are just dumping us all in the Tenderloin and not making any more housing. So that is one issue of what's happening. The whole Banko Brown case, it's just been contaminated. It's always been pro-Walgreens. It's trying to make this narrative that we are tough on crime with DA Jenkins. And I think she is one of the, to me, Black faces that have been perpetuating harm to the Black community, in my opinion.
I mean, I think for me, I'm going to put it a little bit differently, which is that I think we're all
Not
operating within
everybody,
a system
quiet.
of white supremacy. This is something that we have been fed as a part of, through history, even the types of history books that we are reading, as that we are taught when we are kids, the systems that surround us that we have to sort of navigate, all of them are based on white supremacy. And we are now just starting to understand that and appreciate that and starting to deconstruct that. But many people in power, especially the establishment, are upholding it because in many cases, maybe they feel like they have no choice. In many cases, they have a lot of pressures on them. But ultimately, I think that that's unacceptable, and that we have to hold our elected leaders accountable regardless of the race. And that's why, again, for me, it was not about the DA. It was not about the Walgreens security guard. It was about how much was Banko Brown's life worth. And if we are not, regardless of who you are, treating Banko Brown just like that fire commissioner or just like any other person who was murdered, then we have a serious problem. Or rather, we know that we have a serious problem, but now we're having to face that problem.
I know it's not about the DA, but were you surprised by her refusal to charge? And if you weren't surprised, what was your feeling?
I was completely shocked of how quick. And I mean, if you look at the May 1st interview, she made it like a slam dunk. Like, it was clearly a clear case of self-defense, and it was an imperfect self-defense. I mean, I don't believe, like I said before, I don't believe it was homicide, but it was definitely manslaughter, right? And once she came out and said that, and then a week later backtracked and said, oh, I'm still looking for information, she contaminated the whole investigation. And even like now, with the Attorney General Bonta looking at the case, I'm hopeful, but I feel like it's just to kill the steam of the movement, right? Because we're quiet, and then like Lakeitha O'Neal case, that was a straight drive-by by police, is that it'll be like, oh, I'm not gonna prosecute. And then the steam of the movement goes away. So we have to persist in trying to change these systems that caused the death of Banko Brown.
I would say that I was maybe disappointed, but not
just
surprised
came in
by the DA's position.
stood next to Eric
I'll be honest. I mean, I think that our elected officials feel like they're being, I think, held hostage by the public opinion and by the narratives that are out there nationally about San Francisco, and so they feel. It seems to me, watching, that they feel like they have to, no matter what, be on the side of rule of law and law and order, and they can't show any weakness, or they're afraid that they'll be recalled. And so I think a lot of these elected officials, including the mayor, including the district attorney, are operating from a space of fear. That if they don't do these things and take these sides, that they will be out. And certainly the mayor's polling has been really, really bad. So I'm sure she's worried. I don't know about polling on the DA, but I'm sure she's also similarly worried that, that things are not getting better, even though they've been elected. And so,
I mean, at what point did law and order morph into shooting someone who's unarmed for stealing snacks?
Yeah.
That's a really, really good question. I mean, I certainly don't think that's law and order. In fact, I think it sets a dangerous precedent, because what, to me, that it does is actually enable vigilantism. And that is incredibly, incredibly dangerous. So yeah, I agree, it's not law and order.
Well, I mean, we see vigilantism, right? We see it with the water hose. We see it with now the bear spray. We see it with what happened with Banko Brown. The thing is that we need to find people that are a happy medium, where somebody that neither progressive like nor moderates like. Someone right in the middle, just centrist, where it's just like, you know what I'm saying? It's just, but at least it's fair. That's what it. Right now, we're in a state where it is truly unfair. It is pro-business. It's a lot of money in this city. It is a lot, and it took me 30 years to really know how valuable this city is, right? It is a lot of money in the city, and it's a lot of people that are trying to shape a different narrative. And what we need, the mayor, what we need our board of supervisors is is to really bring communities together and not separate us. But you have to have vision. You can't go wherever the wind blows. And that's what we have a lot of politicians is people are mad, now tough on crime. People are criminal justice reform, now soft on crime. Or, like, we just need people to have vision and be pragmatic on solving these, because these are complex problems in our
You
city.
mentioned, are people shaping a narrative, or has the narrative gotten out of hand?
I think people are shaping a narrative, and I think the narrative has gotten out of hand, right? I mean, I think like we forgot COVID, right? I mean, I was one of the ones that thought we were shut down too long, and then that is why our downtown, that is why Old Navy is gone, that is why Nordstrom's is gone. Our city used to swell up to 1.6 million people Monday through Friday. Our muni used to travel 700,000 people daily. Mm-hmm. All of those numbers are down. San Francisco was still San Francisco, but we was bustling with people. And now it's the deleted COVID, and all of a sudden it's fentanyl, it is rampant theft and everything that's killing San Francisco. No, that may be a component. I will not disagree, but 50% of that is COVID. And how we approach COVID. We picked people over businesses, and certain states pick businesses over people, and then we're just seeing that with our economy.
I would actually, I don't know if I agree 100%. I mean, I think that, yes, certainly COVID did have an impact. I mean, my business got shut down during COVID, but I also think that there's a lot of other things that people have gotten used to during the pandemic, like, for example, shopping on Amazon, which have actually contributed much more to the shutting down of businesses than necessarily people, not being at work, for example. Not to discount that, but I just think that this problem that we are seeing, this doom loop, is much bigger than us shutting down during COVID. That there's much more there. Let
me also ask, where is the bottom? Because, yesterday there was a public safety meeting in Oakland, and a man felt entitled to say that we need punishments like Morocco, where they cut people's hands off for stealing. Yeah. And I can't imagine saying this in public, and I'm just wondering